Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Trouble to Transformation. Today's guest, I have Dustin Hogan. Dustin is a registered therapeutic counselor, and his main area of focus is in men's mental health with anxiety, low self esteem, and depression. Dustin is also a certified life coach who incorporates performance and mindset coaching. Dustin is the founder of Therapy for Dudes, which I do believe goes live in May. I have not only had the experience of Dustin being one of my instructors at the Rhodes Wellness College out of Vancouver, but as a client for business coaching where I made some serious milestones in launching my new career. Welcome, Dustin. I'm so glad to have you on
Thank you.
today.
So excited to be here and to hang out and spend some time with you.
Yeah, it's what a journey. I'll just let our viewers know that when I signed up at the Rhodes Wellness College, my inspiration was to be a certified counselor. However, part of that program was becoming a certified life coach and Dustin was my instructor. And wow, you nailed it. You knocked it out of the park. It was such an incredible
Thank you. Yeah, it was
experience.
a pleasure working with you and the cohort. I loved that work that I got to do as an instructor. So much fun.
Yeah. So tell us, how did the Rhodes experience impact your personal life?
Yeah, so obviously I went there first as a student, started in January 2020, and it was a whirlwind. When I had signed up for the program, the intention was the entire thing was supposed to be in person in Vancouver, and then 2 months in,
Mm.
March 2020, we all got impacted significantly with COVID. So the program then went online, expecting that at some point we'd get back in person, but it never did. So I ended up taking the entire thing, pretty much
Mm.
the entire thing online. And as challenging as that was, it actually, worked out well from a business and a practice standpoint, because I knew I always wanted an
Mhm.
online virtual practice. So really forced myself and even clientele to get comfortable with that. So that was challenging, but also, a great experience as well. And then, as you know, going through the program is it's incredible, but it pushes you in a lot of ways, and it certainly pushed me in a lot of ways. But coming out the other end,
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made.
Oh my God, you couldn't have said it better. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made as well. And it's interesting because the online experience, I'm not too sure what I actually expected, like for the experience, but we
Yeah,
connected. We made some lifelong friends
definitely.
online. And I'm not too sure if you're aware, but there's a bunch of us meeting in Vancouver
Oh,
for
nice.
graduation. So we're all meeting each other in person for the very first time. But other than that, though, like you said it, the online experience was still really
Yeah, it
impactful.
was. It really
Yeah,
was. And
yeah,
I loved every aspect of it, and still am in touch with a lot of people from my cohort and obviously students and
yeah.
stuff like that as well. So yeah, amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, it was, and the content is phenomenal.
It is.
Like, never in a million years did I ever think that there was that much information in just a 2-year program, a diploma
Hmm.
program. It's left me hungry for more,
That's
actually.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many takeaways from not only the coaching side, obviously the counseling, and really the
Mhm.
personal and professional development that comes as part of that program. It's means drinking from a fire hose at times. There's a lot coming at you, but I know for me, it,
Yes.
it just it forced me to grow in so many ways, and forever grateful for it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and for our viewers, Rhodes is very experiential. So, aside from all of the academic, which
Hmm.
there was a lot of reading, lots of reflection papers and presentations, and it was like you said, drinking out of a fire hose. I couldn't have said that better. It's so true. However, the experiential part was that every single modality that we learned, we had to try on
Yeah.
for ourselves. So we would go into breakout rooms and it would be like client counselor switch, client counselor switch. And on a personal level, I've never done so much
Hmm.
healing.
Hmm.
Oh my God. It was like, The cost of the program was also cost of
Yes,
therapy.
sometimes it was challenging to face that some days, but yeah, it was to me, is
Mhm.
exactly what was needed.
Yeah. So let's
Mhm.
touch on that, challenging some days.
Yeah,
Yeah, because our whole life is ripped wide
most
open.
definitely. Yeah, and for me, it kind of challenged me in a lot of different ways as far as what I wanted
Mhm,
to do work-wise, career-wise, business-wise, coming out of it. I
mhm,
was pretty clear going in and I wanted to focus in on men's mental health. It was interesting though, when I signed
mhm,
up for the program, I'd always thought of myself more as a coach than a counselor, but I wanted to add in the counseling skills and knowledge to help with the coaching. But funny enough, as I went through the program, I really, leaned into the counseling side of things. So now I see myself more as a counselor that brings a coaching flavor and a coaching approach to the work that I do. So that certainly challenged me. Probably the biggest challenge throughout the program was my relationship and breaking down in my marriage and how painful that was and how it
mm.
pushed me in so many different ways, and can even just feel the emotion coming up now, and
Yeah,
really leaning into my cohort to support me and to my instructors to support me, my family, my friends. And I mean, it took me to places that I never expected to go, certainly during that program, but it was exactly what was needed. And coming out of that, so much
mhm.
learning that I didn't anticipate, but once again, it was exactly what was needed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The learning, I didn't expect that much
Hmm.
content, like the depth of the content, and then also some of the instructors that have
Hmm.
decades of experience. Some of them even with PhDs in forensics and whatnot. Like the experience was so
Hmm.
vast. So it was quite the experience. So now you did kind of touch on, your marriage and whatnot. Was that kind of what led you into the life coaching counseling arena? Was like due to your own life?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at the time that wasn't the reason. I mean, the relationship
Okay.
was solid when I got into the coaching space. I mean, this was a few years prior to going to Rhodes. I've always had a passion for personal development. I've always had a passion for deep
Mhm,
growth from a meditation side of things, introspection. So that's what really led me to the coaching space initially. And then certainly my own challenges
mhm,
dealing with anxiety and depression throughout most of my life. So had a natural drawing to that space, and then going to Rhodes and
mm,
obviously life experiences going through that program, and then just deepening my passion and excitement for that type of work really is what's driven it forward. but
mhm,
but yeah, I mean, over the last probably 10, 15 years, I've just been naturally drawn to personal development, personal growth, those types of things, and it was just
mhm.
one thing led to another in a really positive way.
Yeah, that's excellent. And that's I kind of share that same experience too, where I was really, really drawn to the self
Hmm.
improvement arena. However, what I was finding was there was a lot of programs out there. It was really hard to decide which one was a
Hmm.
good fit. However, I'm more geared around the trauma
Mm.
informed, which is what Rhodes absolutely
Yeah.
delivered was the basic counseling skills. Because it's definitely not a one shoe fits
Hmm.
all with some of the programs that are offered out there. Not saying that they're not good programs, but Rhodes
Yeah.
goes deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes so deep that I didn't even realize how many wounds I actually had
For
going into
sure.
it.
And it has a funny way of bringing those up
Yeah.
in certain exercises or certain content. But
Mhm,
yeah, going back to what you said about the experiential aspect, that's what really drew me to the program as well. The academic side of
mhm,
things, the skills could really be learned anywhere, but you combine that with the experiential aspect and the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual wellness aspects of the Rhodes model
mhm.
really allows it to stand forward in a big way. And once again, just so happy with the decision to
Yeah.
go there and still connected to the community in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if anybody that's listening right now is got one foot in the door, I encourage you, take the leap. Take
Hmm.
the leap. It's game changing. It will change your life for the greater. But one thing you mentioned, Dustin, is that you experienced some of your own
Hmm.
depression and mental health challenges. Do you mind taking us a
For
walk through there?
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's something I think, I've dealt with for a good chunk of my life. And initially it showed up as anxiety and
Mhm.
ruminating thoughts and certain times when I had panic
Mm,
attacks, that type of thing growing up, as a early teen, and then certainly into my 20s. And I mean, at the time, I didn't really know what it was. I didn't, what anxiety was. I couldn't necessarily name it or define it. It was just something that I was experiencing, and for the longest time, felt broken. Felt something was wrong with me. Didn't even tell anybody about it really at all. Wasn't talking to my parents about it. My
mm,
friends, my sister. I held it all in for fear of judgment or just a lack of
mm,
understanding what was going on. So for the longest time, kind of suffered in silence. And eventually it got to a breaking point where finally just started to talk about it a little bit and started working with therapists and counselors mid 20s ish.
mhm,
But it still continued to get worse. And then probably mid 20s or so is really when the depression started to kick in. And I mean, that really
mm,
knocked me on my ass in a lot of ways. And, days of just dark thoughts and really struggling to
mm,
get through the day a lot of time, and yet still feeling and almost pressuring myself, pushing myself to show up with the mask on, like so many people do,
mm,
and so many men as well, feeling the
mhm,
need to show up strong and tough and stoic and charismatic and all of these things. Yet many days when I was showing up like that on the surface, internally things were falling apart. I was crumbling in a lot of ways.
mhm,
And, it took kind of a series of rock bottom moments, I guess you could say, that finally forced
mhm,
me to find another therapist who I opened up to him in ways that I hadn't opened up to anybody before. That gave me the courage then to talk to my parents, my sister, my wife at the time, finally as openly and
mhm,
vulnerably as I'd ever been. It wasn't easy. It was terrifying. Yet it started to move me in
mhm,
that direction to really break things open in a good way. And of course, I knew that they were going
mhm,
to be there to support me. But now that I had finally opened that door up, really having the support from them. And, this is kind of 2017, 2018. And then it was a series of events that led me to decide to go back to school for the counseling piece, knowing right away that like I said, I
mm,
wanted to focus in on men's mental health and be that
mhm.
support system for other guys. So yeah, there's and that's not to say that. I
Yeah,
mean, some days there's still ups and downs. It's not all sunshine and
of
rainbows.
course.
But the big difference now is I've got
Mhm,
such a toolbox of tools that I could be able to reach toward. And
mhm.
part of those are tools that I
Yeah,
have to engage on my own. Other tools are reaching out to other people for support, being willing to ask for help, being willing to say, man, things are not good right now, and just trusting in friends and family to lean into. And yeah, I mean, everyone's fighting a battle that nobody knows anything about, so it's
yes.
important to take those steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's thank you for sharing that, Dustin. It's a
Hmm.
vulnerable share, but I think that these types of shares are very important for people to observe and listen to because that's the message somebody needs to hear right
For
now.
sure.
That's possibly in that same position. Because one thing that I did hear you say, Dustin, is that on the outside, everything looked
Hmm.
okay, and on the inside, you were falling apart. Is there anything, do you think, that was recognizable for friends or family to observe if somebody they love is going through the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, sure, there were certain maybe avoidance tendencies or
Avoidance. Mhm.
isolation. at times. But with
Mhm.
that said, I learned to hide that quite well. I would almost isolate
Mm.
in secrecy. But my mom is incredible, and she's got mother's intuition. So a lot of the time, she would be feeling
Mhm.
things and would ask, and still does, thankfully. So I'd say, if for those in your life that you maybe have an idea that something might be going on, just being willing to ask. It doesn't mean they're always going to respond to it,
Yeah.
but I know for me,
Mhm.
knowing that people were there, even just through check-ins, even if I didn't maybe respond
Yeah.
to it, still was that glimmer of hope and that little sliver of light that came through at times.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's true, mothers do have an
Hmm.
intuition. I know that when I was going through my challenges, my mom and I weren't even living in the same location, but for some reason, she would get up in the middle of the night and
Hmm.
pace the floors. She was getting anxiety, and it came out of nowhere, and it was because she was feeling
Yeah.
my energy, but she just couldn't put the pieces of the
Yeah.
puzzle together. But now looking back, we're like, "Oh
Hmm.
my god, you felt
Yeah.
that." Yeah, for sure. One thing you did say, Dustin, is like some ruminating thoughts and some very dark thoughts. Do you mind sharing what those dark thoughts might have
Yeah,
been?
for sure. I mean, on the rumination side of things, especially from an anxiety standpoint, it's a lot of what
Mhm.
if thinking, a lot of catastrophizing. At least that's what I
Mm,
tend to default to, is worst case scenario. And, well, what if this and what if
mhm,
that? And am I going to be? A lot of the times with anxiety, it's am I going to be capable to deal in that moment? And even though we all can handle things in the moment, that's not the way that anxiety looks at things, because it's constantly scanning the environment
yeah.
for threats. So, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with that? Is this going to be a failure or a success? And so that's really on the anxious side of things. And then depression, yeah, I mean, there's certainly been periods of thoughts of suicide. There was never any sort of plan in place,
Mm,
but to have those
mhm,
thoughts come into my mind was terrifying. Of, why am I thinking this way? I want to live, but there's this part of me that is just in so much mental and emotional pain that seems like the only way out. And I mean, these thoughts would just be relentless, just flooding my mind. And really, the only
mm,
escape was going to sleep. That would be my only freedom in the day, was when I went to bed a lot of the time. And then I would wake up and those thoughts were there. And because certainly when those thoughts started coming in, I wasn't talking to anyone about them. So it was just suppress, suppress, suppress. But as we know, what you
mhm,
resist persists, and those thoughts just
mm,
continued to persist at a very, very deep level. And it really it manifested almost the way I described it is, it felt like I was crying from the inside out, where there was the
mm,
emotional pain was so deep that it just felt like I was, yeah, crying from the inside out. And just
mhm,
this physical, this mental, this emotional weight. And oftentimes with depression,
mhm.
they say that it's anger turned inward. And that's exactly what it felt like.
Ooh,
It felt like there's
mhm,
nothing that I could do that was right, and constant criticism, constant putting myself down. And it was just this relentless cycle. And at that time, I wasn't doing this type of work. I was actually on the road as a professional speaker and going into schools speaking to
mhm,
students. And I'd have to get on stage in front of 500-600 kids, and would have to turn it on to engage and to entertain. And then oftentimes I would get back into the rental vehicle to drive to the next event, and I'd be in tears because it took so much out of me, and there was so much
mm.
pain going on at the time. So yeah, definitely some dark moments and some dark memories there for sure.
Yeah, and I do believe that when people are experiencing depression like that, I do believe that suicidal thoughts are
Hmm.
normal. I think that we all have them, right? However, the ruminating thoughts, when it keeps, like you said, every time you were awake and conscious of it, they were back. Was there ever a time where you started to put together a plan?
No, no, I was never at that point.
No.
Like I said, it was more
Mhm.
just devastating that I was even having these thoughts, because that was the last thing that I wanted. They were just relentless in the
Mm,
way that they were coming in. And as a result, it just
yeah.
felt so upsetting because I didn't want to be dealing with that, but it just kept getting worse and
Mhm.
worse and worse. And then yeah, thankfully I worked with that therapist who was really the first person, and I laid all my cards out on the table and was, met with compassion and empathy and
Yeah.
respect. And then from there really started to tell everybody close to me what was actually going
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand how it takes so much energy, to get yourself out of that dark hole in order to perform in front of an audience. Like, people don't understand how much energy emotional processing
on.
actually takes. It is exhausting. So I think one of the signs would be someone who sleeps
Hmm.
a lot.
Yep, totally. Yeah, yeah.
You know, I yeah, I think a lot of people are labeled lazy or unmotivated, when really there's a way bigger picture going on. They're not lazy. They might not be unmotivated, but they're, like you said, they're battling something that requires an incredible amount of
Hmm.
energy.
Yeah, yeah. And some days just
Yeah.
getting out of bed seems like you're scaling Mount
Mhm.
Everest. But I found in my experience, and even
Mhm.
now when I notice my mood dipping, I've got to default back to
Mhm.
those, habits that I know are going to build back some momentum for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have seen your profile with the Rockstar
Hmm.
Academy. And that's what you're referring to, correct? Is the Rockstar Academy where you were conducting workshops and whatnot. And man, like I'm telling you, as an outsider, not knowing you, just as an outsider, I would have thought you had the world.
Hmm.
Like you had everything that people
Hmm.
dream about, to be up on that stage, to have such a successful program and some DJing as
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
and yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no,
Sorry,
no. I mean,
Dustin.
that's sort of past life with DJing back in the
Mhm.
day, but the same idea of being able to just connect with audiences and to be able to have that
Yeah.
that deep connection with people is something that is passionate about for sure. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because, the rest of us outside looking in, that's a life we
Hmm.
dream about. You know what I mean? To be a successful DJ and a successful Rockstar Academy facilitator. But yet the inside looked much, much, much different. I'd like to touch back a little bit on how you felt
Mm.
broken and you didn't want to really reach out to anybody because you thought that there was something
Yeah.
wrong with you. Was there anything like, was there a catalyst that happened in your life or did it really just come out of nowhere?
I mean, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere. It certainly built a lot.
Mhm.
We moved a lot growing up. We moved 7 times
Mm.
before I think I was 14 years old, different cities throughout Ontario, and then Winnipeg, and then Calgary. As
Mhm.
my dad progressed in his career, it led to opportunities, and as a result, we got to move, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, so much opportunity, so much
Mhm.
excitement, getting to have different experiences, and at the same time not a real sense of home base. So felt like a bit of
Mm.
an outsider a lot of the time, and even now as an adult, I still feel that at times where, do I really belong? So Calgary, where I am
Mhm.
now, certainly, I spent the longest amount of time here. Was also in Vancouver for a better part of a decade as well. So some
Mhm.
roots in those two places, but yeah, kind of a combination of moving in those very early formative years where, I'm sure that impacted things. Some injuries in
Mhm.
sports at an early age, 13, 14 years old, and then having, making the decision to step away from, playing hockey and that type of thing. And then
Mm.
as I got older and stepped into the entrepreneurial world, certainly some things worked out well, but other things didn't go according to
Mhm.
plan, and that impacted confidence, self-esteem, just who I am as a man in the world. So yeah, kind of a combination
Mhm.
of life experiences, and then, like I said, certain stigmas for, I mean, there's a lot of stigma out there for a lot of different people, but as a man myself,
Yes.
felt like I needed to show up in a certain way. And a lot of that was self-induced,
Mhm.
I certainly am will take full responsibility for that, is that a lot of it was feeling the need to show up a certain way. And as a result, maybe not talking about what was actually going on, and then it built and built and it built until it had nowhere else to go. And I mean, that's the case for so many of the guys that I work with. On paper, they've got everything
Mhm.
that would be deemed successful: family, high paying job,
Yes.
power, success, all of these things, yet very broken on the inside. So I'd say that's the case for a lot of
Yes.
people.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up your childhood as a part of that because as the Rhodes program, we learned about the human
Hmm.
development, like the Eric Erickson's model of human development. And, we're not fully developed until we're like
Hmm.
25, like, and those adolescent years are very important with due to our
Hmm.
development, like with our identity, our morals are going online, our values are starting to go online because we're getting more
Yeah.
autonomy. And one thing you said is that you couldn't play sports anymore, and there's probably a little piece of your identity wrapped up in that.
Most definitely. Yeah, and I mean, it was interesting because I had this
Yeah.
big back injury, and it was had to kind of come to this point of making a decision. Do I continue to go down that path and try and play, or do I
Mhm.
shift gears? And I certainly found other passions that I got involved with, from snowboarding and going to the gym and those types of things. But looking back, those are very
Mhm.
solo missions. It wasn't team sports anymore. So
Mm.
I, looking back as well, I realized,
Ah.
okay, maybe that's regret is probably too strong of a word, but looking back, I'm like, okay, I probably missed out on some further development that could have come from, continuing team sports as well. So,
Yes.
I mean, we all make decisions
Yeah.
as we go through life, and they send us in different directions. And I
Mhm.
certainly wouldn't be where I'm at now without those things. So it all
Mhm.
works out, but
Of course.
I love, there's a Steve
Yeah.
Jobs quote, right? He says, "You connect the dots looking backward, not forward." And
Oh,
that's
so true.
exactly the experience
Yeah.
that I've had, from, the DJing to the
Mhm.
speaking, all of these pieces leading to counseling. And sure, there was, setbacks and failures along the way, but to me, it all leads
Mhm.
to where we need to be.
Yes. And I think people need to understand that our childhood development does play a huge part in who we are, in this world. And having a look backwards, I think a lot of people kind of downplay some of the things that happened in
Hmm.
their childhood. And it's like, no, that's a huge piece of it. And like even moving around, like you said, you moved around a lot, and during that time, you're just starting to develop relationship attachment
Hmm.
styles, anxious, avoidant, and whatnot. And so it all plays a big part of our development. So now, like I've got 20 years experience in the oil field. So I've definitely worked in a male dominated
Yeah.
arena. And what I've observed, is exactly what you said, is that men are expected to just show up,
Hmm.
self-induced
Yeah.
sometimes, maybe not, maybe it's expectations too from the home front. But do you think that men have been like indoctrinated to like, suck it up, big boys don't cry, get over it, show up, be a man? Because that's definitely my experience in the
For
oil
sure. And I
field.
think, I mean, to me, that's the point to highlight there is different context. I certainly think that that's maybe been ramped up than in other areas. And, we're not trying to make
Hmm.
blanket statements or generalizations here, but certainly I'd say, across the board, that's been messaging that as guys we've all received in one way or another. I've been
Hmm.
lucky to have some incredible male role models, from, obviously my dad, like my number one hero, and
Hmm.
both my papas, my grandpas, and good friends and their fathers and stuff
Hmm.
like that. But that's not the case for a lot of guys as well. But I really think that things are shifting, are starting to shift. And one of the things that really inspires me about the work that I get to do is a lot of younger dudes have been reaching out to me. Guys in their early 20s, they've
Mm.
just maybe they're finished university, they've got their first job, they now have some benefits that they want to use toward mental health, and they're being proactive
Mhm.
about it. They're not showing up in a reactive state, which I'd say 80% of the people that I work with, it's a reaction to something that's, shit's hit the fan in one way or another.
Yeah.
But these younger
Yes.
guys are now reaching out to get ahead of it. So I'm thinking, okay, if this is the future in some ways, then we're moving in the right direction because of conversations like you and I
Yes.
are having right now, and that you've had across, your episodes, and so many other people that are trying to destigmatize in some ways, or more so normalize men talking
Yes.
about mental health, because we all need a hand
Yes.
at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And like I still keep in touch with a lot of my colleagues from the oil field, like other safety
Hmm.
professionals. And right now, they said that the biggest workers' compensation claims right now that they're seeing is mental
Mm.
health.
Wow.
Now, please don't quote me on that. I have
Of
not
course.
done that research myself with the numbers. However, it comes from a fairly reliable, trusted source, and she's really good at researching that kind of those statistics. And I'm just like, wow, of course we're starting to
Hmm.
see this.
Yeah.
Of course, because even as a safety professional, when I was investigating incidents, forget about policy and procedure. We all know the policy and procedure that's on the wall. We read them every day. But hey, how's everything going on
Yeah.
at home? How are you doing? How's your wife? How's your kids doing in school? And just sharing that little like vulnerable moment
Hmm.
with them, they would break
Yeah.
down and be like, yeah, things are not going very well. So if things are not going very well in here, in your heart and in your
Hmm.
mind, do you think a policy and a procedure is gonna
Yeah.
make a difference? Yeah, it's tough, right? We need to yell this from the rooftops.
Completely. And even
Yeah.
just those simple little check-ins can often go a long way. And like a how
Yes.
are you doing, like really how are you doing?
Yeah, like, really, how are you doing? Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and just recently too, I interviewed a young man by the name of Dominic
Mm.
Johnson, and he was a D1 level athlete in 2 different sports. And now he's decided to become a life coach and specifically, well, not specifically, but really tailors his work towards
Cool.
athletes who are leaving the sport.
Mm.
Because whether it's the oil field or a sport, it doesn't matter. I think that when they hang up the uniform, they have
Yeah.
no identity. That's their whole identity is wrapped
Yeah.
up in that. So yeah,
That is.
interesting. Yeah, so it's excellent. Yeah, it's excellent work, Dustin. I'm so happy for you that your business is really becoming successful and there's lots of young men that are reaching out,
Yeah.
proactive versus
Yes.
reactive. I think that's very
Yeah,
important.
it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it really is. I mean, I love the work that I
Mhm,
get to do every day, and such a wide variety of guys that do reach out to me for a variety of reasons, and it's something that I'm,
mhm.
yeah, honored and super grateful to do every single day.
Yeah, and I realize that as practicing therapists and counselors and whatnot, we're not really at liberty to share any details, with our client sessions, whatnot. However, can we talk about some of the common themes that you're seeing?
Definitely. Yeah, of course. Obviously, confidentiality is always key, but general
Mhm.
themes is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys are feeling the pressure at home, at work, of, back to the
Mhm.
identity piece. Like, let's say
Yes.
somebody's been working in the same role or the same company for 10, 15 years, and it's not that it's the grass is always greener, but starting to think about, okay, well, what about this or what about that? And there's some fear there, especially if they do
Mhm.
have a family and they've got kids at home. Taking those risks, there's not as many opportunities to really take those risks. So that's one of the big things that I've seen quite
Yes.
regularly as well. You know, very common theme amongst most clients is, a lack of maybe emotional vocabulary of being able to precisely and accurately describe what's actually going on. And
Mhm.
as a result of that, one of
Yes.
the very first tools that I introduced to a lot of guys is a simple, straightforward feelings wheel, just to be able to name what it is that you feel, right? and
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so many of the guys that I work with, they'll print that out, they'll frame it,
Mhm.
they'll have it at the office, they'll have it at home. And even for myself, that's a tool that I use still personally every single day of, name it to tame it, feel it to heal it, which is such
Mhm.
a,
You gave that to
yeah, well,
me
I can't
too.
even take
You're
full
like,
credit for
"Heck."
that. That was another student of mine. So, um, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then going back to what we talked
Mhm.
about earlier, on paper, maybe they've got everything that would deem them a success, yet still feel a sense
Mhm.
of emptiness, still feel that gap that they're trying to fill with more money or more responsibility or more.
Yes.
But the more they try and do that, the bigger the hole, the bigger the gap gets. So really just coming
Mm.
to that place of you know deep self-worth is sometimes a struggle when someone on paper maybe looks like they've got everything, but internally, once again, that feeling of brokenness. So those are some common themes that I
Wow.
see amongst many guys that I work with. Obviously other pieces as well, relationships and the communication, and habits is another big
Yeah.
one as well, getting routines dialed in. So
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely love that because that's actually what I'm observing as well. Is just like you said, that people are in these jobs for 15, 20 years, and now they're just so out of
Hmm.
alignment. It doesn't bring them joy anymore. And it's so easy to say, like, live in alignment, follow
Yeah.
your dreams. It's so easy for someone to say that, but when you have little kids at home and a full-time
Hmm.
mom, a wife at home and a mortgage and maybe 2 vehicles in the driveway, you can't just walk away from certain things and
Yeah.
change your life. So it requires, a very strategic
Hmm.
plan,
It does.
and it could take
It can,
years.
yeah. And if nothing happens or nothing's changed, or that feeling of being stuck just gets bigger and bigger and more
Mhm.
powerful, and can really be this anchor
Yeah.
that can hold a lot of men down in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing that you touched on too is the identity a piece. Again, like we put so much of our identity into our
Hmm.
job title and also achievements. And what I witnessed a lot was men that are working like ridiculous amount of hours, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for weeks on end. They come home, they're so deflated, they're exhausted, they're burnt out, and then they have the honey to-do list and kids to entertain, and it's just like they're a
Hmm.
machine. And some guys, they do well with that because they truly are this
Hmm.
workhorse, but then others they're getting beat down.
Totally. And the other side of that coin, and I even notice it sometimes in myself, is sometimes that
Mhm.
default to working harder, working longer, pushing harder is actually an avoidance of the real pain that's going on below the
Yes.
surface. So I've got to be even mindful of
Yes.
myself. Like, yeah, I'm a driven guy. I like to work hard, but it can be this fine
Mhm.
line between driving towards the vision but then trying to escape some sort of pain that might be lingering below the surface. So that can often be a big
Yeah.
aha moment for a lot of guys of like, oh man, I'm actually avoiding pain here, not trying to work towards something to
Yeah.
grow. So that's something to be aware of as well.
Yes, absolutely, and that's part of the fight, flight, freeze,
Hmm.
fawn. When you're in flight energy, we tend to, be a workaholic and perfectionists, and even my sessions with you with the business coaching, like, I had to get out of the perfectionism
Yeah.
as well. And I'm still a little bit critical, but, I'm much better now.
Yeah, we're both
You know?
recovering
But yeah, but you're
perfectionists. Yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah, and people do need to realize the signs and symptoms of a dysregulated
Yeah.
nervous system. And that's one of the themes that I'm seeing amongst a lot of clients and
Yeah.
my friends, and now looking back within myself too, is not knowing anything about the nervous
Hmm.
system, not knowing that it is a foundation of working with thoughts, emotions, outward
Hmm.
behaviors, and our personal
Hmm.
narratives that we're telling
Hmm.
ourselves, right? So I love it that you brought in the feelings wheel because you got to name it
Yeah.
to tame it. And I think that a lot of people resort to anger. It's just that's what happens when you're in a state of
Hmm.
overwhelm. Eventually anger shows up, but that's the tip of the
Exactly.
iceberg, right? Yeah, and I've shared the anger iceberg with lots of people and the
Good.
feelings wheel.
Yeah, those are two really
Yeah,
solid tools.
yeah, solid tools, right? Because you're absolutely right. I'll say it again. You absolutely have to name
Hmm.
it to tame it, because once we get into that core emotion that, oh, I'm
Hmm.
grieving. I'm actually not feeling angry. I'm
Yeah.
actually grieving. So once we understand why we're grieving, now what does it
Yeah.
need?
Well, once we give it a
Yeah.
name, we shine some light on it. It's no longer a mystery. It gives some control back. There's a
Yes.
sense of confidence because now, okay, I'm not just feeling whatever, I'm feeling a few different things. And it's always fascinating to me every time I do check in with myself emotionally. Maybe I'm saying that I'm anxious or I'm saying that I'm angry, but really it's like, okay, no, there's some frustration there, there's some sadness there, oh, there's some hurt, there's some insecurity, maybe there's hunger, even, right? There's a
Mhm.
whole host of things that are going on below the surface that lead to that thing that shows above the surface. So if we can catch
Yes.
those feelings at a 2 or 3 out of 10, we won't need to get to an 8 or 9 out of 10, because by the time someone's at an 8 or a 9 out of 10, they've been emotionally hijacked and it's too late. It's too late at that point. So being able to identify it with precision, with accuracy at a 1 or 2, and then stopping ourselves from going down that path, to me, that's worth its weight in gold.
Yes. Do you think that not being able to name it to tame it is maybe where those feelings of brokenness and there's something wrong with me kind of come in because we're so confused about what we're actually feeling that we don't understand it. So then we're like, "Oh my God, something's wrong with me."
I would say, I mean, that makes sense because there's a lack of clarity in that
Mhm.
brokenness. Because even brokenness is not a feeling, it's not an emotion. It's more of, I think I'm broken, but I'm actually feeling maybe insecure or sad or whatever it might be. So yeah,
Mhm.
having that laser focus of really being able to identify it, to me, is the first
Yeah.
first step to work through any of those uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm also noticing in a lot of people and
Hmm.
myself too is that with our dysregulated nervous systems, we've kind of adopted it as being the norm.
Hmm.
We hit the ground 2 feet, we're already checking emails and text messages, we're already starting to get activated, then we're filling our day with caffeine, getting into rush hour
Hmm.
traffic, and all of these are like perceived threats. We're angry, we're frustrated, and then cortisol is being released, and now our neuroception is online. Well, I mean, our neuroception is online all
Hmm.
the time, like every waking day of our life. But however, when we get into these fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses, I think that after a while they become fixed
Hmm.
networks that now are really resistant to change. What would you say about that? Like, how does a person start making those changes?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, and I mean, to me, the pathways in our brain, they're just, it's like a pathway through the forest. If you've gone left for 20 years, well, that's the path of least resistance. So that's the easy route. We can go right,
Yes.
but it's going to take, a machete or an axe to chop it down. But eventually, if we continue to go that way, we're just building a new pathway. So something,
Mhm.
along the lines of, yeah, identifying those feelings, but then also the thoughts that are connected to it. And it's not about replacing it with something super positive, because the brain's just not going to believe that, because the pendulum is swinging so
Yes.
far over. So what's more of a neutral thought, or more of a balanced thought, something that's more based on objective
Mhm.
reality, and replace those negative patterns of thinking with something that's more balanced, and then just continuing to put in the reps over time. The good news is it's not going to
Yeah.
take another lifetime to shift those pathways. but it's also not a weekend project. It's going to take some time. And it
Yeah,
also takes that level of
it does.
self-awareness to recognize, okay, I'm jumping to a conclusion here, or I'm catastrophizing, I'm ruminating on something where I
Mhm.
don't really have the evidence for it. So what's objectively the truth here? Okay, I'm going to go down that path, and then I can just 2 seconds later, when my brain defaults to negative again, I'll go down that path and then just continue to repeat that over the course of time, so that new pathway forms, and then that becomes the automatic thought as opposed to the negative
Yes.
pathway. But it does take effort. It does take a
Yes.
heck of a lot of effort, but it's
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah, I like that how you say it does actually require a lot of effort. And the forest, that's I like that
Mm,
analogy. That's a good one. Yeah. Because I know even for myself, I responded very well with cognitive behavioral
same. Yeah.
therapy and a little bit of dialectical behavioral therapy too, the
Hmm.
DBT. Because I used to ruminate terribly with some dark thoughts, but I would also pull my hair,
Okay.
almost probably borderline
Hmm.
OCD. And I just started reading about those types of disorders and habits and whatnot. And I actually broke myself
Good
of
for
it.
you.
But it was a very conscious effort because it's like you said, it's a default. It just happens
Hmm.
automatically. But once I started to catch myself, then I started integrating a new
Yeah.
narrative. And within about 2 weeks, of continuously going like, correcting the default
Hmm.
thinking, within 2 weeks, I had completely stopped.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yes. Yes, and, I recently tried that with a friend too, where, they put an elastic band
Yeah.
on their wrist, and every time they caught themselves ruminating about their ex relationship, which would send them into a spiral of
Yeah.
dark thoughts, and then all of a sudden they're angry and, and wanting to drink, they would snap their wrist with that elastic band, kind of like a little bit of a pain
Yeah.
stimuli, and then enter the new thought. And within about 3 days, they had stopped
Hmm.
ruminating.
That's impressive. That really is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just little tips and tricks. I don't even know where I learned that from because I didn't learn that
No,
at Rhodes,
no.
but
I've heard of
must have read
similar
it somewhere.
things like that, but yeah, it's neat to hear it actually someone used it effectively.
Well, I guess it would kind of be similar to
Mhm.
tapping, you know what I mean? Because you're interrupting a thought
Mhm.
process, going out of here
Yeah.
into here.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, what would you say to somebody right now, like like the men out there, well, and women, but that are struggling right now, that are too afraid to ask for help because maybe they're afraid of, like you said, the
Mhm.
stigma. Maybe they're afraid of losing
For
their job.
sure. It's a scary, scary thing to do. So certainly don't want to minimize that at all. And at the same time, more so to just normalize that once again, a lot of people are dealing with it. And you'd be surprised at who might be going through something painful. One of my best friends in the world, I mean, I've known this guy for 20 plus years, and our relationship really built because we were having one conversation, many, many decades ago. And I was talking a bit about anxiety. He was talking a bit about anxiety. And we realized we were both dealing with the same thing. Yet, for both of us, seeing the way that we show up in the world, never would have thought that about the other person. So it does take some courage
Yeah.
to have that initial conversation. I'd say, if anything, find somebody that you feel safe with, and use that as the first step. But with that said, even in my case, like, I really opened up deeply that very first time to that therapist, right? A guy that essentially was a
Mhm.
stranger. And sometimes
Mm.
that's actually easier to have those types of conversations with somebody that's in your life, but not in your life the way a friend or family member is, to just build up some
Yes.
momentum. That's certainly what that was the case for me. I built up momentum with him, and then carried that courage and momentum to then have the real deep conversations with my parents, with my wife at the time, with my sister, and with my friends. So find someone
Mhm.
that you feel safe with, be it someone you already know, or a potential counselor, and use that
Mhm.
to really start the conversation, but have the conversation regardless of how.
But have the
Yeah, regardless of how
conversation.
scary it is, don't go at it
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would also like to encourage parents to have these conversations with their
Mhm.
kids. Because I'm hearing a lot of parents now too. They're like, oh, my kid doesn't ever come out of his room. He sleeps all day. And I'm like, I think it's time to have a conversation, just check in on them. And because I think at that age too, they have no idea what's going on. And those feelings are probably very scary. They're
For
foreign.
sure, and for parents, I know, a lot of the dads that I work with, sometimes they maybe struggle to
Hmm.
have those types of conversations with their kids because maybe they feel like they don't have
Hmm.
all of the information, but you don't need to have all of the
Mm,
information. You don't need to be the expert. You just need to be somebody that's willing to
yes.
hold space, to empathize, to ask questions and say,
Yes.
"Hey, this sounds scary. I can't imagine what you're going through," to come in with that
Yes.
empathy and say, "Hey, we're going to get through this
Hmm.
together." You don't need to be an expert in any of this, at least to have that initial
Hmm.
conversation and then support them in finding resources that would be the experts in the space.
Yes, absolutely. And now speaking of the experts too, like even on my own journey of going to therapy, there was a lot of counselors or psychologists that I didn't
Yeah.
click with. I didn't feel like we're in alignment. So I would just encourage people to book the
Yes.
discovery calls. Find a
Yeah,
fit.
yeah, because fit is 80% of
Right.
this work, I would say. The other 20%,
Yes.
anyone can learn by going to the right schooling or program, but 80% of the effectiveness
Mhm.
comes down to the fit. So you make a good
Mhm.
point. You might not find that fit the first time or the second time, but don't be discouraged. You will eventually, but it does once again take effort and perseverance sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And be
Hmm.
honest. Like, tell the truth, don't hold back. I mean, these are professionals. They've heard it all.
Hmm.
So there's not a story that I don't think we've probably haven't
Hmm.
heard yet. You know what I mean? Well, I'm not, I shouldn't say
Yeah.
that, but even in my journey of finding therapists too, I had one that said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't think we're a good fit." And at first I was like, "Oh my
Mm.
God." I mean, obviously I wasn't in a crisis situation, but I mean, she did me a favor by recognizing that we were not a good
Yes. Yeah.
fit, and the same goes as if you're searching for a
Yeah.
therapist. Like you really do have to
Yeah.
feel safe
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trusted. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's excellent, Dustin. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything is there anything that you wanted to did we cover it all, or is there something
I
that we're
think we covered
missing?
it all. Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah?
talked a little bit about schooling and counseling and coaching and
Mhm,
DJing and speaking and my journey most definitely. So yeah, it was a
mhm.
fantastic conversation. And if anyone wants to reach out, my door is always open. You can find my contact information on my personal website, dustinhogan.com. And then, as Rhonda mentioned earlier, going to be launching Therapy for Dudes in the next few weeks here, in the next month or so.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, we never
Fair
touched on
enough.
that. I
Fair
knew we were
enough.
forgetting
Yeah.
something. Yeah, let's tell us about Therapy for Dudes. I think this is really
Thank you.
important.
Yeah, so it's a new men's mental health brand that I am so excited about. It's really going to be the umbrella of everything that I'm doing from a men's mental health standpoint. So, one-on-one support through coaching and counseling. There's going to be an online course program or courses and programs as well. Video
Mhm,
content, blogs, all kinds of stuff. So, coming out the gate, we'll have a couple offerings initially, and then it'll continue to expand. And really my vision for Therapy for Dudes is to create a world without stigma around men seeking support for their mental health, because even just in my own
mhm,
journey, as I've worked through some of those stigmas and starting to come out the other end, it's been I'm grateful for that support. So really, that's the vision for Therapy for Dudes, really redefining men's mental health in a lot of ways. So
mhm.
therapyfordudes.com will be live May 1st. And then, in the next couple of months
Mm.
after that, some courses and programs. So very, very excited for the launch of that. It has been a labor of love getting to this point, and I feel like it's just at the
Mhm.
starting line. So very excited for that, and obviously you can connect with us on Instagram as well at Therapy for Dudes. So yeah,
Mm. Oh, it's gonna have an Instagram profile
yes,
as well, at
yeah,
Therapy for Dudes? Oh, excellent. I love it. Please, if you have any launches,
of
tag
course,
me in it and I will share it
awesome,
on my
thank you.
profile. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I support this 100% because I'm very passionate about men's
Yes,
mental health as well. And so I'm so thankful that we were able to
me
have this
too.
conversation today, Dustin. Yeah. So I will include all your links in the description
Perfect.
as
Thank you so
well.
much.
So yeah,
Yep.
dustinhogan.com and Therapy
Yeah.
for Dudes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you,
Thanks so much,
Dustin.
Rhonda.